Okay, I've got three sort of anecdotes that I'm going to try and sew together. I mean, I understand the question before us is the criminal justice system unfairly biased against men? I'm going to give you my answer up front. I don't know, but I have my suspicions. Okay. Now, being aware, of course, that everyone's suspicions are based on their own experiences, I just want to tell you three of mine. One of them, I do work as an expert witness. Most of it is in the U.S., for a variety of reasons. I'm a psychologist, and they seem to like psychiatrists to do what I do up here in Canada, so I do it in the U.S. And so most of the work I do is in criminal court, and it's usually murder trials. But every now and then I sort of cross the line and step out into other kinds of courts. And so, as fate would have it, in 2009, I got drawn into a custody divorce case in Seattle. A guy by the name of Eric Jorgensen, whose common law partner was in the midst of a custody dispute with him and had accused him of sexual abuse and physical abuse. Now, of course, the argument, as some of you are aware, is that sometimes these things are trumped up to be used as a card to play in court. And so there's always a question whether the abuse actually happened or not. And so I was doing an assessment on him, and there was a guy that was an expert for the other side whose name's Doug Bartholomew. And I don't usually use people's names, but here's one. If you ever run across this guy, turn direction quickly and get away as quickly as possible. He's a guy who, by his own admission under testimony in court, said he'd assessed 1,000 men for potential domestic violence and found 1,000 men high risk for domestic violence. Never had one false negative. Okay, never. Anyway, he had this system of assessing men where he would bring them in and ask them a lot of pointed questions, and then when they were sort of stumbling over the answer, he would point out the fact they were stumbling as proof of their guilt. Yeah. I, in my report, said that his procedures were more consistent with an inquisitorial legal system than an adversarial legal system. And then went to court and tried to sort of impress on the judge what the statistics actually said around domestic violence. And by the way, in this case, we put 3 of Jorgensen's ex-girlfriends on the stand who'd lived with him for a cumulative total of 10 years, said he was never abusive ever, completely the opposite kind of guy. They went back and found an incident where he got into an argument and fight with a woman in a bar when he was 18 years old and used it to show that he had an abusive personality. Okay, even though nothing had transpired since. Okay, so I got up and argued against all this stuff, and the judge in his decision sided with the other side and said my opinions were outside the norm in domestic violence work. So I don't know why I didn't see that coming, since I empirically support everything I said, and the other guy was a charlatan. But I didn't see it coming. I should have seen it coming because 2 years before that, I was asked by an editor for the journal Child Custody to write a review article that looked at the relationship between domestic violence and child custody. And so I did that, and I got drawn into this, what's called a polemic, sort of an ongoing debate in the literature. The academics love to do these things. It's an academic knock-down, drag-em-out thing with a guy called Michael Johnson at the University of Pennsylvania. And so basically what I said is, having read the literature, I discover now that, yeah, it's a great thing to assess the parents for risk of child abuse, but assessing them for spouse abuse isn't going to really tell you much because there's only a 6% overlap between wife abuse and child abuse. And no one had ever measured the overlap between husband abuse and child abuse. So I got drawn into this sort of lengthy set of arguments back and forth, and part of it was that Health and Human Services in the US looked at risk factors for child physical abuse and fatalities, child homicide, and found that biological mothers were involved 60% of the time and fathers 40% of the time. And that was a huge sample, 750,000 cases. So in other words, the bottom line was they should be assessing both people, not just one person. Seemed only fair. Okay, finally, in 2009, someone sent me the website of the American Bar Association, and especially that part of the website dealing with domestic violence. And on that website, they had 10 myths about domestic violence that, which they were refuting one after another. And each one of the refutations led to the gender paradigm, this notion that all domestic violence is male perpetrated against women, women are blameless, victimless, et cetera, play no role in it. And when I reviewed the literature the American Bar Association had used, I found that at least half the cases used as evidence just a government publication that had no evidence, no research, no data, nothing. They were just making it up as they went along. The other half were spurious interpretations of research written by someone who didn't know how to read research. So wrote a rebuttal article saying the American Bar Association website should not be believed, it was wrong, and here's why. Subsequently, they changed it. Now, why are these things relevant? I think the last two are certainly relevant to tell you how a professional website for the Bar Association is getting lawyers to think about domestic violence from the gender paradigm point of view solely and exclusively, even though that's not supported by research data, not supported at all by research data. Is that done? Done. Okay. All right. More to say, but we'll get to it later.